Hi, good morning, everyone. We're about to get started. Before we do, I just wanted to give a couple of housekeeping notes. Restrooms are directly behind us. You see that big green wall. There's signs pointing in the direction of the restrooms. If you are going to be posting to social media, we invite you to please use hashtag Connect15. And then also, if you didn't drop your card for the drawing in the afternoon for a special prize, you must be present to win. So with that, let me introduce our host for today, Marlon Evans, the CEO of GSVlabs, and please help us welcome Marlon.
Thank you. Ooh, that was loud. Yes, hi. I just wanted to welcome you to GSVlabs. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with what we do here, but we are an accelerator for over 160 startups from across the globe. We work across four main industry areas: mobile, big data, sustainability, and education technology. And we really do see ourselves as a platform that helps bring people together from different kind of perspectives, whether that be university, investors, government. So when Mario and Zach and Marcy came to me and said, hey, would you be willing to host this event around innovation and kind of cross-sector collaboration between the public and private sector, it was one of those things like where she had me at hello. I was ready to go because this is exactly the type of gathering and people in the room that we think is really critical to solve society's toughest challenges, which is what our goal is at GSVlabs, and we know that can't just be something that the tech sector does or something that the private sector or public sector is doing alone, but it really needs to be in collaboration. We need to get the greatest minds together with those who have the infrastructure and the scale to see those ideas come to fruition. And what better opportunity than Connect15. So we're really honored to have everybody here. We look forward to you meeting some of the companies that we work with on a daily basis here, and also hope to have you back at some point in the future to give you even a bigger and better perspective of what we're doing at GSVlabs. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome up Assembly Member Kevin Mullin and County Supervisor Warren Slocum, two individuals who I think embody this idea of partnership and really looking for innovative ways to apply technology to some of our toughest problems. Thank you.
How come nobody sat in the front row? This is like school. All the good students are in the back of the room, right? All right. Well, good morning, everybody. And on behalf of Kevin Mullin and myself and the entire Connect team, we're very grateful that you're all here to Connect15, changing technology for a changing world. And thank you, Marlon, wherever you went to. For that introduction. Marlon, as was mentioned, is the CEO, the Chief Encouragement Officer for GSVlabs, and we're certainly appreciative that they agreed to host us. And so let's give it up right now for GSVlabs. I don't know if you had a chance to peer in some of the offices as you were coming in, but it's a pretty cool place, isn't it? It's pretty interesting, right here in Redwood City. And thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to be here. It's sincerely appreciated. When I came in this morning, I'm sure there'll be other people in this category that will come later, but the traffic, Kevin, was really bad. And I'm hopeful that someday you can do something about that. I'm personally proud, and I know Kevin is too, to serve in this area where the leadership of local government, our nonprofits, and the education community is so interested and engaged in using technology to better serve our constituents. And as all of you know, it's interesting as well as challenging to live in a region where innovation is king and where technologies are changing the world. I don't know if you saw the movie, it just came out, Steve Jobs. How many of you saw that movie? Not too many moviegoers here. Okay. Steve Jobs, we're working, says Rob. Steve Jobs in the movie said, quote, now listen to this. This is years and years ago, but actually he says this in the movie. Quote, "What a computer is to me is the most remarkable tool that we have ever come up with. It's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds." Think about that. He also asked in the movie, what if the computer was a beautiful object that was something you wanted to look at and have in your home? And what if instead of it being in the right hands, it was in everybody's hands? John Scully replies in that scene, he says, "We'd be talking about the most tectonic shift in the status quo ever." And I think if you think about it for just a moment, that's exactly what has happened. Steve Jobs was a pretty good movie. I liked it. You have to know that I'm a movie buff. And I try to go to the movies when they first open, and I always pride myself on seeing the latest before any of you. And so, in the past, when you were at the movies, you probably handled the call of nature the same way that I did. You just got up, tried to find a restroom, and hoped like heck that you didn't miss anything really great in the movie. But now, today, you don't ever have to worry about missing the best part of the movie thanks to a new app. There's a new app. I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but it's called RunP. RunP lets you plan your bathroom break at the movies so you don't miss anything. Now, I've got the app on my phone. How many of you have RunP on your phones? Nobody. I figured. So if you had that app and you were watching the movie Steve Jobs, it tells you that at 56 minutes into the film, or at 1 hour and 19 minutes, the dialogue at the recommended break takes place when Steve Jobs asks his director of marketing, Joanna, "Why haven't we ever slept together?" She looks at him and she says, "'Cause we're not in love." Well, RunP says that right after that line is delivered is a great spot to find the restroom. In fact, RunP tells you you've got 4 minutes to get back to your seat because the next great scene is going to happen in 4 minutes. Let me give you one other example of how Steve Jobs' vision has come true. I know this guy. He's an ordinary guy like any of you or like any of the people that work here at GSVlabs. And he actually wrote code. He wrote a program to control his hot tub. Imagine that. So what happens is the first thing he programmed it to do was to measure the pH in the water of the hot tub. And he thought, well, that's pretty cool. But I could also then, if the pH was low, have the hot tub send an email to Amazon to order the chemicals for the hot tub. So he did that. So his orders were placed automatically when the pH was too low and he didn't have any supplies. The next thing he did was he decided that it would be cool to be able to open and close the lid of his hot tub by the press of a button in this app that he wrote. So he did that. The last thing he did was he wrote some code to measure the water displacement in the hot tub when people got into it. And the curious thing about that, when asked why would you be interested in that, was, well, then I can tell the weight of the people that are getting into the tub. So he was in London, and he was looking at his app, and he noticed this measurement come through of the water displacement and the weights, and he knew all the way over in London that his 15-year-old daughter and her boyfriend were in the hot tub. And he didn't think that was right, being a single parent. And so he pushed the button in the app, and the lid started to close on the kids. Now, so you might ask yourself, why would the husband and wife team that coded RunP, or why would the guy with the hot tub spend all this time and energy doing these kind of things, right? It's really not changing the world. It's not bringing peace to the world. They're just sort of fun things, right? But the answer was, it was fun. It was something different. It was a hobby. And each one of those folks said it solved some kind of real world problem. So RunP, obviously the call of nature, and the hot tub, well, you get that one. So the bottom line is that technology is all around us, and there are apps being written every day that do all sorts of things, and Steve Jobs' statements, I think, have come true. So it was several years ago that many years ago, when Kevin and I brainstormed about the possibilities of gathering local leaders to talk about how to solve problems using technology. And we were especially focused on civic engagement and democracy and voting and all the things that we all care about. And so we had this vision, this dream. And at that time, when we'd have coffee, we'd just kick around these ideas. And here it is years later, and we're doing our third Connect conference. So our vision has come true, and each of those conferences has been a realization of our original ideas. Now, we all know that government is being challenged by disruptive innovations like ride booking services, right? Uber, Lyft, those kind of things. Home sharing, the recent election in San Francisco over Airbnb. Possibilities of driverless cars on El Camino, for instance. All these things are pushing 20th century government to deal with 21st century constituent demands, which are very different than in the bygone era. Tim O'Reilly, a noted publisher and futurist, in a 2009 essay said, quote, "Too often we think of government as a kind of vending machine. We put in our taxes and get out services, roads, bridges, hospitals, fire brigades, police protection. And when the vending machine doesn't give us exactly what we want, we protest." He said, our idea of citizen engagement has somehow been reduced to shaking that vending machine of government. Right now, there are entrepreneurs in garages and offices just like these, and in fact, right here in Redwood City at GSVlabs, there are young people kicking and pounding and shaking that vending machine of government. They're looking how to transform government processes that are really highly regulated, slow, and designed for a bygone era. That new generation of innovators that's here start with the question of what's the problem and what solutions can be developed to address that problem. They're trying to figure out how to make life better by disrupting mega agencies like the FAA and the FDA. And at the individual level, they're trying to program your refrigerator so that it connects to the local supermarket so that when you run low on milk, the code will actually be sent to the supermarket, and lo and behold, milk will show up at your doorstep without you having to do anything. As you're going to see later, the startups that are housed here at GSVlabs are at the forefront. They're at the forefront of the next big things, right here. So I'm personally excited to be a part of Connect15, and I hope you're excited to be here, and I hope that you find this program that the Connect team has assembled interesting, educational, and perhaps even inspiring. And on behalf of Kevin, let me just thank you all once again for taking time to be here. Thank you.
Very well done, Warren. And it's Warren who supplied that initial vision, and I'm sort of Robin to his Batman. He has been a visionary since I met him, and he is the real inspiration behind this conference, and it's an honor to partner with you today, Warren, and thank you for providing that compelling vision. I didn't see Run P coming this morning. I want to know what kind of venture capital went behind that app, as a matter of fact, but just wanted to add a couple of quick thoughts, and thank you again to Marlon Evans and GSVlabs for hosting us this morning. Every time that I watch the news, I'm a political junkie, a news junkie. Whenever I listen to the radio or read the newspaper, and I am one of those people that still picks up the daily newspaper, I have newspaper ink on my fingers, I am reminded of the amazing leaps in technology. It seems every day brings new technological accomplishments, and government is struggling to keep up. I see that at the state of California with some of our IT problems that I've had the misfortune of overseeing as a chairman, or pardon me, as a member of a budget subcommittee for. We've been able to see up close and personal where government has failed in its interaction with technology. And at the home of Silicon Valley, we could do so much better than we do at the state level. But I know that this is a real challenge as well for local governments. As Warren mentioned, disruptive technology is forcing a major shift, and we in government are caught between trying to embrace, to regulate, and to find a balance that does not stall innovation. Like the past two conferences, we have assembled local companies that have tools and platforms with examples of how government can embrace this technology. New this year, our third year, is going to be something called a mashup panel, which will showcase how technology can address current government challenges. We're at a venue that fosters a climate of learning, collaboration, and innovation, and capitalizing on GSVlabs' unique position as an incubator, we will hear from startups about their vision, along with potential solutions to actual problem statements that are facing government and the nonprofit sector. It's exciting that this work is happening here in Redwood City, Assembly District 22, and the presentations we hear tied directly to San Mateo County, our needs and our priorities. So in keeping with the spirit of innovation, I'm pleased to announce that thanks to Peninsula TV, you see the cameras around the room, today's conference is being live streamed, and the feed is accessible at our website, which is www.connectsmc.org. On a final note, for those of you using social media, we encourage you to use the hashtag ConnectSMC on Twitter and Facebook, and make sure you like us. So with that, let's get started with our keynote. And I have the pleasure of talking a little bit about Nelson González. Nelson, a native Colombian who grew up across multiple countries, Nelson began his career as an analyst for the British Royal Household and Booz Allen based in London. During his career, he has advised the Colombian president and the CEO of Burberry on innovation practices. He managed the campaign of Afghan Finance Minister Ashraf Ghani for UN Secretary General, and he developed social impact portfolios for Charles and Helen Schwab, Mo Ibrahim, Larry and Joyce Stupsky, Walter and Elise Haas, the Stewart Foundation, the Asia Foundation, as well as the Sobrato family. Nelson was founder and CEO of Advent Strategy, a global innovation strategy firm with major corporate and government clients. He also served as Chief Strategy Officer at the Stupski Foundation, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, where he created a campaign to redesign public education systems across 8 states. And I know we have a number of educators in the room with us today. Nelson also served as a director at the Royal Institution World Science Assembly, which led breakthroughs in pandemic preparedness and surveillance in collaboration with global pharmaceutical and multilateral institutions. Nelson did his doctoral work at the London School of Economics and Political Science and studied at Oxford University and Amherst College, where, not surprising, he graduated with high honors. Please join me in welcoming Nelson González. Nelson.
I will make sure that the short bio gets sent next time. It's a real honor and privilege to be here with you because, frankly, this represents a huge homecoming for me. I created Declara with my co-founder, Ramona Pearson, because of you, because of a career with public servants trying to do incredibly difficult things with very little help, very little data, and very few tools. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you and people like you around the world have inspired me to think about how we can use technology to innovate in the public sector. And it's a homecoming as well because GSV is our lead investor, so it's thanks to the support of GSV and Mark Flynn, who's on our board, that we've been able at Declara, just down 101 here, to begin to do some amazing things around the world. So today you're here to talk about changing technology for a changing world. And one of the things that inspires me is the fact that we can begin to think about how technology inspires us and informs us for indeed more than hot tub management, bladder management, or the many things that we use technology for. But we have some very important challenges. We have a public education system that needs to support the kids who depend most on public education. We have public health systems that need to support dire needs. We're all under-resourced, stressed, and technology indeed can do more than ad placement or the kinds of things for which analytics are being used that are useful. But I think the fact that we sit in the universe's capital of innovation can do more than just provide us with better shopping or better lifestyle management. We can indeed change our worlds, change our county. And what I want to talk about today is how I and we have learned, I think, what are a couple of key principles about technology that Declara we're trying to work on very deeply. Number one is, how do we humanize technology? How can technology increasingly disappear? Because in fact, technology should serve the very things that we're trying to do as we become better human beings and better communities. So how do we humanize technology? And I want to talk a little bit about what we're learning through the fusion of cognitive neuroscience, cognitive psychology, learning science, and big data, semantic analysis, predictive analytics, and mobile apps. That's a mouthful, but essentially, how do we bring the human sciences together with data sciences to help you do what you're doing better here in San Mateo? And then secondly, how do we democratize this? Because if we do not have equity here in San Mateo, across the world, we're going to have to face even larger social problems than the ones we have today. So how can technology help humanize our experience, and how can technology actually democratize and bring equity across some of the divisions that we are all here to conquer? And for all of this to happen, I think one of the things that I have wrestled with a lot is, how can public servants become designers? Because indeed, all of you, and in past lives when I have served as a public servant, this has been, I think, the key calling, the key vocation, is not how do we manage a system that needs to be put to a dignified death? How do we essentially act as hospice workers? But how do we also act as midwives to new systems that are being born in front of us? New education and public health and transport and communication systems to help more than anything the most vulnerable. And so I think as we humanize And as we democratize technology, and particularly here as we have the privilege of sitting in this hotbed of innovation, how can we help you, we now technologists, entrepreneurs, help you embody, take on, and become masters at this vocation of being designers and innovators of the systems that you steward, so that you can negotiate this incredibly tough and lonely challenge that I know very few people realize you negotiate every single day, which is being both hospice workers to dying systems that need to be put to a dignified death because that's where they're going, and midwives to things that are being born that you are creating that are amorphous, embryonic, unseen, but must be nurtured and tended into their full birth. So I'd like to talk a bit about what I've learned about public servants being designers and how technology can help us grow. So why Declara? Why is this a homecoming? Why is it incredible to be in front of a group of committed public servants at the home of our lead investor at GSV? So as that all too long bio said, I've done a bunch of different things, and I've learned, I think, particularly from a couple of lessons in health and education, some things that I'd like to share with you. I spent some time at the World Health Organization thinking about pandemic preparedness and how can public health systems innovate to support the eventuality of the mutation of H1N1 in a way that allows or causes millions of people, billions of people to become sick within a few weeks, and that will require billions of vaccines for which we, until a few years ago, had no capacity to create. And so there was an incredible need to very quickly design new systems that could bridge the market failure that caused no incentives for GSK and Bayer and Genentech and others to actually do what we needed them to do because the market did not incent them to do that. Very interesting problem. And I realized that the people at WHO, the people in ministries across the world had no tools through which to think about how to negotiate this. As you saw, I worked right up the street here with Charles and Helen Schwab in San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, around homelessness, substance abuse issues, and public education for children who had learning differences. And it was fascinating, now moving to the very local level, to see exactly the same thing. That when we're talking about issues like homelessness and harm reduction and substance abuse and what to do with differences in a system that is made to, for historical reasons, put kids through exactly the same kind of learning regardless of who they are, I realized the same thing, that you, and I mean now literally you, and your colleagues here in this county, were wrestling with these problems with very little tools and very little capacity to understand what was going on around you and how to innovate. I went from the Schwab Foundation to the Stupsky Foundation, where we created this incredible 8-state innovation lab network. And we asked the question, how do we redesign public education systems so that the kids who depend most on public education can have access to deep and personalized learning experiences regardless of the free and reduced lunch ratios in their school? And I learned a lot as I spent 5 years with superintendents and principals and teachers and board members about the fact that being a designer of new systems of education required tools that we didn't have, required a kind of collective intelligence that was missing. And yet, heroically, day in and day out, I saw your colleagues do that. And I spent some time at the BBC World Service in London thinking about how does media impact things like human rights, and particularly massive changes in gender roles and rights around all sorts of differences, particularly in Africa and Asia. And also realized that while the media was very powerful, the public policy implications of what the media, something like the BBC, was enabling us to see. So I had the privilege of spending time with colleagues of yours around the world working on different issues and realizing that in so many ways you are empty-handed because of the fact that we in technology have spent so much time developing apps that help our lifestyles and analytics that create better shopping, but aren't actually helping us to become better human beings and better communities. And so throughout all these experiences, I'm beginning to learn, I think, a couple of meta lessons that I want to focus on today because I think they're relevant to some of the issues that you want to talk about today around recycling and reading by age 3 and some of the educational questions that you have here locally. And that is that it would be amazing to work together, and I literally mean together, and I'm saying I would love to offer myself up to be of any help that I can, and Declara is also here to serve you as a free, open platform with a team of people just down the road, hungry to have users like you helping us understand how to use big data analytics for public service innovation. And so as we offer ourselves up to you, there are a couple of things that I would love to explore together. One is, how can we use data to detect patterns? How can we use open data, big data, to begin to understand what's going on with age 3, reading at a grade level at age 3? What's going on with personalized learning and education? What's going on with the 2020 recycling goals and the many, many other initiatives that you're working on? So pattern recognition around data, seeing making visible what's invisible, seeing what's actually around us but unseen because we don't have access to that data, I think is where we can be very helpful. And then secondly, creating collective capacity, because I've learned from my work with public servants around the world that the most important thing we can be doing is helping each other continue to learn and build the collective adaptive capacity, the team capacity to continually innovate our systems. Because if we figure out how to redesign public education to scale deep and personalized learning for the kids who depend most on public education, we're only going to have to do it again in 10 or 15 or 20 years because the changes that we're living through are so rapid and so constant. And so how do we together build adaptive capacity in the collectives of our teams, of our counties, of our departments and institutions? So these two lessons, pattern detection and in talent development for collective capacity, are the things that animate so much of what I'm spending my time doing right now at Declara. And as we do this, I think that we can begin to address this digital divide that I know is on our hearts and minds. So let's get concrete. I want to give you 3 real-world examples of how all this is playing out for us at Declara and what we're learning about pattern detection and collective capacity. The first example is from Australia, where we have the privilege of working with all of the country's teachers as they implement the equivalent of Common Core. The second is from my country of birth, which is Colombia. I just flew back yesterday, actually, from Bogota, where I was doing some very cool work that I want to talk to you about. Colombia is now the most wired country in the hemisphere and considered to be one of the top 5 most innovative and business-friendly countries on the planet. Now, I'm sure that you all have different conceptions of what Colombia is about, but this is the Colombia of today. It is literally the Silicon Valley of the region, and I want to talk to you about how all of that is being used for some unbelievable work around poverty reduction. And then thirdly, I want to talk to you about what we're doing with our neighbor county and city, San Jose, around smart cities. So some very real-world examples. So let's go to Australia, and actually I'm going to, technology assisting, I want to actually go to the product and show you what all this looks like. So Australia, a very innovative country. They, because of global warming, have pretty much lost their agricultural market, and they're doing really well in mining, but if anybody's been to Perth, you know that they have about 10 years left of that. And then what? And so they realized about a decade ago that they needed to become sort of like Singapore, a human capital hub, an engine of talent development, so that Australia could be a true Asian economy and participate in the innovation of talent. And so they rightly said this has to start with our K-12 system. And so we have to redesign the curriculum and the assessments and the practices that will educate a whole generation or two of students for this new world. And so they created a new curriculum that, great for them, unfortunately for us, leaves Common Core in the dust in terms of its innovation and the rigor of that curriculum, which is great news. But if you're a 5th grade teacher of 5th grade math in Perth, it's pretty difficult to know how to use formative assessments to foster critical thinking using project-based learning with Aboriginal content, which is sort of what the new curriculum asks you to do. So they asked us to help them with that. And Declara, which is a social learning platform that uses big data and semantic analysis to personalize the learning of professionals, came in. And what we've done is brought together tens of thousands of educators, and now soon hundreds of thousands, across the entire country in a massive innovation initiative that is, to me, incredibly gratifying because it's an example of how to build adaptive collective capacity among public servants. Because what you're seeing here are, and hopefully you can see there are, as of this morning, because this is live, 728 organically created professional learning communities that are looking at all of the challenges in practice that teachers face as they implement the equivalent of the Common Core. I mean, imagine if we had this. It's kind of embarrassing to show this because we don't have the equivalent here. But we've got 728 communities working on things like new pedagogies for deep learning. And so they're blogging away and creating wikis and ingesting all sorts of content from all over the web. We actually enlivened 20 years worth of curricular data through our semantic analysis and made all of that discoverable. The point, though, is that we can, and to the point of making visible what's invisible, we can do pattern detection on the real-time learning of professionals. And so let's say we're a teacher in Melbourne and we want to see what's going on. We can literally zoom in and see the conversations that are happening here. So there's a blog on media education. There is something on scaremongering about kids. And so all these conversations that are going on about the implementation of the curriculum. And as we analyze this data, we can actually detect patterns and see where is it that formative assessments are being used to foster critical thinking? Well, more or less in a suburb of Melbourne than in Melbourne, or more or less in Sydney than in Perth. So we can begin to generate hypotheses based on real-time interaction of professionals trying to serve a real-world problem, like the implementation of the equivalent of the Common Core. And what this has done is it's completely contradicted the Ministry of Education's assumptions about the professional development needs of teachers in Australia as they implement this curriculum. So amazing insights are surfacing from a trust and respect-filled approach to supporting professionals, which is something that I find quite moving about Australia. Instead of putting cameras in classrooms and spying on teachers and punishing when they don't do things exactly as some people want them to, anybody heard of that approach? They said, look, you teachers are the experts. Tell us what you need. Show us what's working and not working. And in 728 hubs of innovation, they're doing this in real time. It's incredibly impressive and an example of how big data and semantic analysis around content can help. The second example that I'd like to give is from Colombia. And I've just come back from there, as I mentioned, and something incredible is going on around poverty reduction. So Colombia has used for about 20 years now a program called conditional cash transfers, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, which is essentially highly regulated welfare. There are funds and social services that are provided to families living in extreme poverty, but they come with all sorts of strings that are connected to the interventions that we know actually get families out of poverty. And so they have to do with health and with education and with respect for women and safety in the home and community engagement. And so there are 8,000 essentially social workers working all over Colombia, and they are using little handheld tablets to, on a weekly basis, collect data about hundreds of thousands of families living in extreme poverty on 46 indicators that have been proven now for 40 years to move families out of poverty. And every week, data from across the entire country is uploaded to Bogota, where it's analyzed, and based on the pattern detection within the data, the services that are being provided at a national level, and Colombia is an incredibly large and diverse country, they customize the interventions on a weekly basis based on that data. So imagine changing social service interventions on a weekly basis based on real-time data. Well, that's what's going on in Colombia, thanks to the digital infrastructure that has been built and why Colombia is now considered to be the most wired and innovative country in the region. And so this pattern detection that they're doing with all of this data is also allowing them to develop really great practices. And so they're using our product to begin to say, well, if we're working in let's say, displaced families because of the violence that Colombia has now overcome, and they're not in their homes and they don't have an extended family, what are the kinds of practices that seem to work? Or if we're dealing with children with special needs who aren't close to a special education center, what might we do? And so the ways in which our content curation capacity is helping them collaborate is generating a kind of enlivened library that helps them understand how to support all of this work. And the final example I want to give you is right here in San Jose, where the mayor's office and the city council is using Declara to create this living library on smart cities. So they're asking a lot of great questions about smart cities and open data and open government and e-government. And they're beginning a big initiative where with the city council, they'll be studying together and creating a lot of citizen engagement around these topics. And so what they've done is they've created this digital library on Declara. What do we do when we're trying to figure something out, right? If Santa Clara wanted to start, I'm sorry, if San Mateo wanted to start a big initiative on smart cities, we would all Google together, we'd email each other articles, we would start chatting on social networks, we'd browse, bookmark in our browsers, and we'd go crazy, right? Which is what we're doing right now as knowledge workers. Well, with our product, if for example, we see this article on open government, open data, we can bring this in through a browser extension that turns that content into a living repository of that data so that we can then begin to collaborate around it. And what's really powerful about this is that we can collaborate inside of the text, as you're about to see, so that we're no longer emailing things to one another and losing each other's wisdom. We now have this article in a way that is both easy to read, but more importantly, if I want to now have a conversation about this paragraph, I can mark that insight and bring my colleagues into a conversation that is intertextual, that is actually having to do with the very atomic level content that is most relevant to me. And based on that, we're creating what we call a cognitive graph. So here you see my naked brain. I like to call this intellectual pornography sometimes, because you get to see all the things that I'm thinking about. And if after this talk you think, oh, that guy did not know what he was talking about when he was talking about machine learning, what on earth is he reading? You can actually see. You can see all the things that are informing my thinking about machine learning or education reform or whatever it might be, and then send me an email and say, hey, dude, you got to start reading some new things because you were way off. So you can actually get into the brain of your colleagues as you think about the topics that you're thinking about, and we're doing that by analyzing all of the data in real time based on content curation. So another example of how we are using data to support pattern detection and to support collective capacity. And so what we're trying to do is bring this avalanche of information that we're all suffering under as we try to do the hard job of being hospice workers and midwives at the same time, running it through what we call our cognitive graph, which is our way of using the magical technologies of big data and semantic analysis for more than putting ads on your Facebook page, for actually giving you the ecosystem of content that you need based on all of this data. So what I want to close with is really an invitation, and that's an invitation to think about how we might work together and how technology and open data and content curation and collaboration might actually help you with the kinds of innovations that you want to work on. And so I know that today you're going to be talking about reading and recycling and early education, really critical topics. So what are the design challenges that might emerge from this? I love the way that you're framing this as a kind of design challenges, as very concrete problems that you want to solve. So as you begin that, how might you bring together different sectors? One of the things I've learned from work with on pandemic preparedness or public education or media is that it's absolutely critical to get players from the market, from the academy, from public policy, from the nonprofit sector to get together to translate their logics to one another. Because if I, as an entrepreneur that has a venture-backed startup, is talking to one of you who is, has 3 years to get something done and then has to run for re-election, we may be talking about education reform, but we're not really talking to each other, because I'm thinking about my shareholders and my product market fit and how I'm going to get the kind of scale I need, and you're thinking about re-election because that's your world. So cross-sector translation is critical as we tackle things like early childhood recycling or early reading. And so how do we bring together these sectors? And then collaborating on this open data is critical because that transparency shows us that teachers in Perth are actually killing it when it comes to formative assessments. And it shows us that there is some region outside of Bogota that has the most wisdom about how to deal with displaced families, or that this part of the city council in San Jose is actually bringing up some incredible insights about smart cities. We can know what we didn't know if we share data openly with platforms like Declara and others to make visible what's invisible. And through that, we can, through these cycles of rapid iteration, right, what goes on just behind this wall here as my colleagues innovate through daily scrums, and in our case, we deliver new product every 2 weeks. Our sprints are 2 weeks long. How can government begin to work that rapidly? You may not deliver policy initiatives every 2 weeks, but could you every 2 months? That's what we experimented with in public education, and we could. Every 3 months, we had a whole cycle of system-wide reform that played out. And so how can this rapid cycle prototyping of new policies and practices actually generate the kind of innovation you want? Well, I've seen it all around the world, and I know that sitting right here at the hub of Silicon Valley, you too can think about pattern recognition and about collective adaptive capacity. And so I'm incredibly proud to be able to share what we're doing. I hope that we can collaborate. Please feel free to reach out to me if I or we can do anything at all to support you as you continue to negotiate your roles as both hospice workers and midwives here in our beautiful community. Thank you so much.